All right, so good morning officially. Welcome to Tuesday. Morning, Kang. How'd the quiz go yesterday? Bad? Yeah, why?
So hard.
So hard?
Yeah.
Really? Was it hard?
Too easy.
Too easy.
So hard.
You were just telling me it was so hard.
I mean, too hard.
Victoria, what did you think? It's all right? So? Yeah?
I'll decide when I get it back.
Okay. You'll wait for the... You're not going to speculate at this time? Okay. I'll try to have them back to you tomorrow. I just finished marking the social justice ones, so I can start on these ones. And so, yeah, try and have them back to you tomorrow, and we can review and discuss, right? But in the meantime, let's say hi to Kayla. So hello, Kayla. Good morning, and Harry. Good morning again. Let's jump back in to where we were. Now this is going to be. Oh gosh, is this from Thursday? Is this from Thursday? The last time that was a long time ago. So you'll recall that we watched a documentary on Confucius, right? And he was kind of interesting. Well, he's interesting in a number of ways, but he was interesting because he's one of these kind of great thinkers that was, on planet Earth at roughly the same time, right? So around 400 BC or so, we had the Buddha in India coming up with some very interesting ideas. We had Socrates in Greece coming up with interesting ideas, and we had this guy here coming up with some very interesting ideas as well, right? And so you'll recall that we watched the other half of the documentary that was in which we were talking about these questions, and so let's try to dig out what we remember here. Confucius was a big fan of music, right? Why was he? What did he think was so useful about music, or why was he such a fan of it?
When I'm practicing music.
What?
Because when you're practicing music, you have to stay focused. And the process of practicing music is the way how you do your ritual.
Okay, good. And sorry, Mike, was that you or that was? Oh yeah. All right.
Harmonies in music keeps you relaxed, you calm.
Yeah.
It's from the movie that we saw last week, right?
Yeah.
It's like meditation.
Yeah, good morning. In a way it's kind of meditative, right? So it's very kind of pleasing to listen to nice soft music. I don't think Confucius was into death metal, but we really don't know that for sure. It can be very kind of soft and pleasing, but also like Kenny says, you have to kind of do it correctly, right? And Confucius here is all about performing the sort of regular things in everyday life, performing them the right way, right? Performing them with care. Because he says if you do those things with intention, right? If you mean to do things correctly and properly, that will kind of change you on the inside, right? You'll become someone who does things correctly and properly, right? And if you have a society full of people doing things correctly and properly, well, you'll have a good society, right? So he says it all starts with how you do things. And again, music is one of those things that you have to do with care and precision, right? Those of you who are in music right now, you'll know that if you don't play the right notes at the right time, the right tempo, you're not really playing the music, you're just making noise, right? Everybody has to precisely play their part the way it's written, right? And so, yeah, Confucius, I think, enjoyed music, as many of us do, but it also was, it was an expression of his philosophy, right? You needed to do things correctly and with care, and if you did, then good things would result, right? And certainly if you play your music with care and with diligence, you'll have lovely music, not chaotic racket, right? So we said that he set out on a mission, right? So he came to sort of know his philosophy about what he wanted to do, and he set out trying to, he set out trying to get a government position, right? Because he thought, I'll get into government and then I'll be able to influence kings, right? I'll be able to influence rulers. But that didn't go very well for him, if you recall, right? Yeah, what was wrong?
So like no one really likes him because they think like his idea was like ridiculous,
Yeah.
and no one can, and not many people can really follow the thing that he wants.
Yeah, there was some criticisms of his approach, right? Because he had so many rules for everything. Some people thought, oh, like I don't have time for all these rules, right? It's going to take me the rest of my life to do, to fold my laundry the way Confucius wants me to fold my laundry. I don't have time for this, right? I've got a busy life and we're at war with the kingdom next to us and I don't have time to fold my laundry properly. Like, give me a break, Confucius, right? So there was that element to it. What else was there? He had too many rules. It was too much. Kind of a chaotic time. What did they say about his personality? Yeah, he was kind of, gosh, what's the word to describe him? He was kind of blunt, right? And so he kind of told people exactly what he thought in a very kind of uncomfortably direct way, right? And so nobody was particularly, nobody really enjoyed his presence very much. He wasn't kind of relaxed and chill. He was very uptight and he told you, directly what he thought of you. And so he didn't really make any friends that way. His personality was a little bit off-putting to people.
He basically got into the government.
What's that?
He basically got a job in the government.
I think he was successful in doing that, but I don't think it really led to anything. Like, I don't think he was able to influence any rulers in any way. So I think he struggled to get a job, but even when he did, it didn't have the effect that he wanted, right? He wasn't really able to influence anyone. What was he saying about the relationship between the father and the son and how that might work for a king or a ruler?
If the father like treats his son with respect, like teach them how to do some respect and stuff, like the son will teach it to the other generation based on the system.
Okay.
So that the ruler saw their communities as their child. That's the cool.
Okay,
You
so
think the way how a father treats a son is like how a ruler treats their citizen.
Right.
You treat it and educate them with the right morals, and the citizen will treat it back with respect and following your rules and like that.
yeah, yes, right. So fathers and sons have kind of they each have kind of obligations to each other, right? The father is supposed to teach the son, to love the son, to treat them with care, right? And the son in turn is supposed to obey the father and respect the father and care for the father, right? And so each one has these responsibilities to the other. And you're right. Confucius said we need to extend this to the state, right? So that the king feels like he is the father of his people and the people feel like the king is their father, right? And if they observe these same obligations, yeah, we'll have a good peaceful society. We'll have good rulers if rulers think of themselves as a father, right? Rather than, I don't know, something else. How did Confucius select his students? So we said that this whole government post thing didn't really work out, and so he set off on the road with a group of students. And how did he select these students?
So he saw the one who like has a moral and like what that student might be.
Right. So he looked at the students' morals and what they might be like in the future.
Yeah, willing to learn and like
Yeah, right? He was looking for people who had desire, right? People who wanted to learn. What did he not care about?
Background.
What background? Like what kind of background?
Family background.
Yeah. Family background, right? Did they come from an aristocratic family? Did they have money or prestige or anything like that? Confucius didn't care about that. He was all about whether this person was willing to learn and would they put the work in, right? And he said anyone who came to him freely, who wanted to learn, he would teach them, right? And so, again, how might that apply to governing a state? What was he thinking about? He was selecting his students not based on background, but on desire or talent.
Just like a government should employ the workers that depends on their background, but
Yeah.
depends on like how they rule moral.
Right. And so how did we get rulers back in Confucius's day? How does someone become king?
True inheritance.
Through the what?
Like the father will pass it down to their son.
Yeah, you inherit it, right? Or, you lead a campaign and overthrow somebody, right? So you're either a good warrior or you just happen to be king because your father happens to be the king before you, right? Does that mean you'll be a good king? No, right? And in many cases, the son of a good king is often not a good king, right? So Confucius says, no, we got to stop picking people because of their family name or because of other factors. We need to pick people who are good people, right? Who are moral people. Those are the ones who should lead, right? And so Confucius's students kind of sharpen their intellectual skills here kind of through critical thinking, right? Kind of through argument. So we've talked about that before. We've talked about critical thinking and argument. And they try to solve problems and then they evaluate them, right? One student will make an argument. I think this is a good thing to do. And then the other ones will challenge that argument and try to pull it apart, right? Are their premises true? Are they logical support for the conclusion, right? They'll try to work out these problems by kind of arguing with each other, but not in a mean way, but in a debate way, right? An intellectual debate kind of way. And they would ask themselves these kind of important questions, right? One of the questions that came up in the film was, should you serve a corrupt ruler if you think you can make a difference, right? So if you have a bad king, Donald Trump, if you have a bad king, for instance, and the bad king offers you a job, should you take it if you think you can maybe help somehow? Maybe you don't like Donald Trump at all. Whoops, I said his name. If you say it 3 times, he appears, I think. Just kidding. With him, it's only 1 time. Anyway, yeah, if he offered you a job and you didn't really like him, should you take the job hoping that you can somehow make things better? Or should you not help him at all? Should you not take the job, right? And so Confucius' students were talking about ideas like that, right? Should you take a job with a corrupt king if you think you can help, right? If you think you can make things better, or should you not, right? What's the most difficult virtue to attain? What is the most difficult thing to attain? What is it? It's Ren, right? It is Ren. And what does Ren kind of translate as, roughly? What is it? I can't hear you. Person? It has something to do with the person, I think.
It's a personality. If you are the ruler,
if you're the ruler, you what?
You need Ren to understand the situation of the people.
Yeah.
And you follow policy based on Ren.
Right, so you need Ren in order to understand the people and to sort of create policies based on Ren, but how can we describe what that is? What's that?
I don't even know what it is.
You don't even know what it is?
All machinery?
Yeah, that's how that scholar described it to us, right? It's Ren is kind of, maybe the closest translation is humanity, right? With human-heartedness, right? He says, because that's really what you need for all these things, right? He says, there's, being without Ren, being smart is no good, right? But smart with Ren is wisdom, right? Smart with humanity is wisdom, right? If you have the criminal justice system, but you have no Ren, you have no humanity, then it's just cruel punishment, right? It's not justice. And so he says everything has to have Ren, right? You should do everything in according with human-heartedness, with humanity, right? And he said it was a weird thing because it was the most difficult thing to achieve, and yet you had it just by being a human, right? So you have some humanity just by being a human being, like we all are. But to kind of fully express that is very difficult, right? And many of Confucius's followers say, no, I have not attained Ren, right? Every day it is a struggle to act with humanity, right? To act with compassion, to act with empathy, right? Every day that is a struggle to do, right? Has anyone attained Ren here? No, me neither. Me neither. Give me another week. I think I can nail it. Oh yeah, and this kind of came right at the end of the video, but and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but how do his ideas finally become popularized? Because we heard about his death, right? We heard about the death of Confucius, and he said something like, here I am, the end of my life, no, wise ruler emerges. It's a failure, right? I wanted to change society. I wanted to influence kings. I wanted to make a difference. And yet, everything appears the same, right? I have failed, which is kind of sad, actually. But little does Confucius know that his ideas will live on just a little bit later. And do you remember what they told us about that?
Is it about like there's his student like wandered
Say that one more time.
like his student wandered to like another
Yeah, well, his students will continue to kind of move around and sort of teach his ideas, right? But there will come a time a little bit later when his ideas are more useful. This might be a bit of a tricky question because they asked it right at the end. But maybe I'll leave it. Maybe I'll leave that question unanswered because we are going to come up against it again probably tomorrow. So I'll leave it for us to answer in another day or so. Anything else we should say about Mr. Confucius? No? That was a quick no. Have you heard enough about him? You're done with him? Okay. All right. Felicia's done with him. Okay, I'm just going to jump ahead here a little bit. So, where we'll go now, oh yeah, we'll go here. So, there is a little more about Confucius. Sorry, Felicia. There's a little more about Confucius that I want to talk about in the textbook here. I've got 3 pages for you to read, talking a little bit about Confucius, a little bit about the Tao, and then we'll move on into Qin Dynasty, and I have something for you to see that might give us a more clear picture of kind of what things were like in ancient China. But first, I'm going to give you this to read and some questions to answer, okay? So, textbook is in Microsoft Teams, of course, as it usually is. I'll put some time on the clock here, and I'll let you read. Felicia, how much time you need? 20 minutes? 10. 13 and a half. 14? Deal. Nice doing business with you.
Is that like the Chinatown?
Huh?
When you buy something in Chinatown, it's like this.
Let's see. Yeah, like the textbook will state 5 things that Confucius said, and basically just sort of tell me what he means, right? What's his point? What's the point of each of those? 30 more seconds, and then we'll talk. Okay, good people. So, in the textbook, we have 5 kind of statements by Confucius. And what I want you to do is just tell me in your own words what each one of them means. So let's take the first one. What's he saying here?
Like he said, nobility was defined not by birth, but by their own character.
Right? So what makes a good, noble person isn't the family they belong to, right? Or their last name. It has something to do with your conduct, right? How you behave. What else is he saying here in number 1? Number one. What else is he saying?
I think that the person's values and like behaviors, not the person meaning by values and behavior, not meaning by like, and not like meaning what he got from his money,
Yeah.
or from where he's coming. I think,
Yeah, he's kind of, in a way here, he's kind of talking about who we should look up to, in society, right? And often here in Western society, we look up to people with lots of money, right? We look up to, Jeff Bezos is always in the news, and Elon Musk is always in the news. And it's like, okay, these guys have a boatload of money, right? They have more money than I can even think about. But, are they good people? Do they do good things? No, Jarek has given me no. Why do you say no, Jarek?
Well, Jeff Bezos is exploitative to his employees. For example, when the interview of his lunch, his pays,
Yeah.
he said, "Oh, thank you to my employees and to my customer who paid for my rocket."
Yeah.
Which is kind of thing. Elon Musk. The thing is that with space exploration, it doesn't benefit anyone except for the rich, in my opinion, because they're just burning fossil fuel, which is already bad for the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And once they kind of discover space, I would argue that they will just profit off it.
Could be, right? Yeah. So Jarek says here we've got Jeff Bezos, who's been accused of exploiting his employees, right? His employees make very little money and have, no health benefits or anything, while he makes billions of dollars and launches himself into space in a penis-shaped rocket. Sorry, but that's what it looks like. I didn't design it. That's just what it is. And yeah, he even went so far when they were interviewing him before he went to space. He's like, "Oh, thanks to my employees, you paid for this," right? And it's like, yeah, they did, because you didn't pay them, properly, and that left you lots of money to go into space, right? And again, what is the point of spending all this money and fuel to go up there and to come back down 7 minutes later or whatever? They're not up there very long, right? Yeah.
There it means that they're developing the universe.
They're what?
It's I think Jeff Bezos helped to develop the world. Developing, I think, the Earth.
Maybe. How do you figure?
Because he have planned to make some like lines to go to like other planets, and I think it's going to like develop the science,
Yeah.
develop the earth, and develop everything.
I guess. I mean, it depends what the plan is, but I mean, those things are a long way off, right? Like, a trip to Mars is long trip, right? Unless we master light speed travel pretty quickly. But yeah, like what are these, well, I don't know. Regardless of what these guys are doing, they get a lot of press and attention simply because they have lots of money, right? And we don't know if they're doing anything good at all, right? And Steve Jobs was the same, right? Steve Jobs basically created Apple, right? And people look up to him and worship him. But I don't know that he was a great guy, right? If you hear stories about what he was like, I think he was kind of an ass, right? I think he kind of was. He did great things, but also wasn't a very nice person. I don't know that he was a very noble person. But again, Confucius is asking us to look at people and measure them with a different ruler, right? Measure them not with how much money they have, but do they do the right thing? Do they do good for other people? Right? That's a.
Seen the founder movie.
I haven't seen it yet.
It's about McDonald's.
It's about McDonald's?
Yeah, it's about McDonald's, how they created McDonald's.
Yeah.
He was saved from the Jeff Bezos
Yeah.
the chips on the bar.
Yeah.
And he was really worst person I have ever seen.
Yeah.
But he became very popular and rich.
Yeah. Right. And so yeah, very, very popular, very rich, but yeah, not a noble person, right? Not somebody who does good or does right.
But he was enjoying all of his life.
Sure. I bet.
I think he's good.
I bet. What about this number 2? Young men should be filial at home and respectful to their elders when away from home. What's he?
That it means that the young men should stay with family and should learn from their parents to after they are they walking away from their age 19
Yeah.
and they go to environment.
Yeah.
And because I think the people can learn until 18, it means 80% the behaviors and the values come from whenever they're younger, and then they can make another 20% in life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably true, right? Most of how people are, or a lot of how people are, comes from their upbringing, right? Their interaction with parents. And so Confucius says that, yeah, young men should be filial, right? They should observe their family obligations, right? Obey and respect and care for your parents, right? And if you do that, if families raise good, here he's talking about sons, but if families raise good children, those children will go out to the world and they will also be respectful, right, and careful, and will do the right thing if they're taught to at home, right? So he places a lot of value on how things work in the family, right? Because he knows that those children who are raised in that family are going to go out into society and they're going to act out what they've learned, right? And if they've learned respect and care and compassion, then they will act that way in society. And if they haven't, not so much. What about this one? The noble man does not abandon humaneness for even so much as the space of a meal.
So, a truly noble person is like the one who goes with what was right first before it's their own profit.
Yeah. So the truly right person is putting what is right before profits. And are they abandoning that sometimes? No?
No matter what is happening, they won't abandon their humanities.
Yeah. So you can't, if you're going to be a good, noble person, you can't say, okay, well, for the next hour, I'm going to do something totally awful, but then I'm going to go back to being a nice person, right? Confucius says, no, you don't get to do that, right? You don't get to press pause on being a good person. If you are striving for humanity, if you are striving for Ren, it is a constant thing, right? You don't get to choose when you feel like being a good person and then, you know, you go and do something selfish just because you feel you want to. But then you'll go back to being nice. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. You don't abandon that for any length of time, right? You constantly strive to be a good, noble, human person. Right? I'm going to leave number 4. Yeah, whatever. Number 5, to govern. To govern is to rectify. If you lead people by being rectified yourself, who will dare not be rectified? Sounds very sounds very odd. What does it mean to rectify something?
Good governance flows from good.
Say what?
Good governance flows from good governance.
Yeah, governing comes, but what does the word rectify mean? He says it like 4 times. We have to know what it means. Yeah, to make something to make something right, to make it good, right? To make it the best you can, right? When you rectify something, you make it correct, right? And so he says to govern is to make something correct. And if you lead the people by trying to do that with yourself, who will dare not act the same, right? This is almost a bit of a lead by example thing, right? You can't tell people, do as I say, not as I do. It won't work, right? If you want people to behave a certain way, you have to model it in yourself. Otherwise, people will not listen to you, right? People will not go along with you. He's a wise man, that Confucius. Do you want to take a little break?
Yes.
Okay, that was a very quick yes again. Okay, let's take a little break. We'll come back and we'll talk about the Tao very quickly. Okay, and we're back. So again, we watched that documentary on Confucius, and it told us kind of a lot about his life, but maybe not so much about his particular teachings. So I did want to just, look at some of these things that he says, right? And it's all about conducting yourself appropriately all the time. You don't get to take time off from being a good person, right? You have to be a good person all the time. I know it's a drag, but that's how it works according to Confucius. And again, we get a good society by influencing others, right? Whether it's at home, whether it's in a leadership position. If you want people to act correctly, you have to model that behavior yourself, right? You can't expect other people to act differently while you do whatever you want, right? It won't work, right? You have to model good behavior in order to expect others to follow, right? And that's one of the things that Confucius was all about, right? Everything he did, the way he dressed, the way he greeted people, the way he sat down, the way he ate, he did everything, kind of in accordance with his philosophy, right? Because he knew he had to model things for other people, right? He couldn't just expect people to listen to him and not pay attention to what he was doing. Okay, so, the Tao. The Tao. How does the text describe the Tao? It is mysterious?
Yes.
Okay.
It's like beyond sense perception and yet the source of life and meaning.
Right. So the Tao is mysterious. It is beyond perception. So you cannot see it, you cannot hear it, you cannot touch it, right? But it pervades the universe. It's everywhere and nowhere all at the same time. Very mysterious. And how do you kind of align yourself with this Tao? Because that's the goal, right? Yeah. Ooh, interesting. Right? The Taoists are saying you have to empty your mind of desires, right? And once you calm your mind, then you can live in accordance with the way, right? With the Tao. Which is interesting because that's almost a little bit similar to what the Buddha was saying, right? The Buddha was saying you have to free yourself from attachment, right? You're attached to things. You want things to be a certain way, right? And the Taoists are saying kind of the same thing. You have to empty your mind of desires, of wants, right? And then you can live in alignment with the Tao, right? So not quite the same thing as the Buddha was saying, but kind of there's a little bit of similarity, right? And there we go. So yeah, it's this indescribable thing, right? This sort of force that is the source of life in the universe. It's the ultimate truth, and yet it is nowhere. It cannot be touched or seen or heard, right? And again, for those of you who have watched Star Wars, if this sounds like the Force, it is. I'm pretty sure that the creator of Star Wars borrowed the Tao and put it into his movies and called it the Force. But I'm fairly certain this is the inspiration for that, right? And again, has anyone watched any Star Wars at all? Little bit? No? If you ever watch it, you'll see that there are these Jedis in Star Wars, and they do that exact thing, right? They believe in the Tao, and they're always trying to calm and quiet their mind. Because when they do, then they can discern the will of the Force, right? Or they can discern the way, right? The Tao, and they can align themselves with it. And so, again, the creator of Star Wars, George Lucas, kind of borrowed the Tao, and he called it something else, but it's basically, that's what it is, right? He borrowed this thing and put it into his movies. And so, yeah, we have to kind of empty our minds of desires and wants, and then we can kind of live in a more natural state, right? Not in an artificial state like society. And then, oh yeah, so that's kind of the ground level of Taoism, but how does Taoism continue to develop in the centuries after it's originally kind of founded?
The transformation of the way was broader to include the idea that individuals have a spiritual essence in way of harmonizing with it.
Yeah, so there's kind of, I guess it gets elaborated, right? Like, so just like Mahayana, I think it was Mahayana Buddhism, you know, there's the core teachings of the Buddha, right? And here we have the kind of core teachings of Taoism written by Lao Tse and another guy who I can't remember his name. They sort of create the core teachings, and then over the centuries they get added to, right? More and more people become involved in Taoism. They start to ask new questions and try to answer them, and so things become kind of more complicated, right? And here we see, just like in Mahayana Buddhism, here we see that Taoism becomes a little more complicated. It becomes a little more like an institutional religion with people trying to, you know, liberate themselves, people trying to become immortal, all kinds of things get kind of added on, right? When the sort of base philosophy was a little more simple than that, right? And again, I think that happens with all spiritual practices or with religions. There's kind of a simple core teaching, and then it gets elaborated on as the centuries continue, right? So, okay, we talked about Tao. Let's see, what's next? Oh yeah, ha ha ha. Okay, there's a little more reading for you to do. I apologize, I don't like to do 2 readings in one day, but I do have something for you to watch, and we do need to read before we watch. So, I'll let you read this section too, a few pages, talking about the beginning of the Qin Dynasty. So, as we know, during the time of Confucius, the Zhou dynasty kind of fell apart. All of these states were fighting with each other, right? This warring states period, until finally one king is able to conquer them all, right? So the king's name is Qin. He's able to conquer all these states and bring them under his control. And so China was kind of had an empire, or it was ruled by an emperor or a great king. The whole thing fell apart. There was a lot of chaos. And then finally with the Qin, it is reunited under one ruler, right? And so here we'll see kind of the beginning of the Qin period and some political developments, right? Legalism, some other things that are created by Shenyang, who we'll hear about. We might even see him. And then talk about some of the long-lasting effects of Qin Dynasty, because Qin will help to kind of set the foundation for Chinese empires going all the way into the 1900s, amazingly. So, yes, so I'm going to let you read that. I'm going to give you 14 minutes again, and then I'll check in with you, okay? So again, I'm sorry about 2 readings in a day, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do, right? So, I will let you start reading, and then we'll talk in a few minutes, okay? just one more minute. Okay, people. So very quickly here, how did this Qin Dynasty begin? Okay, and so and who wins? What's his name? Zhong? All right. So he'll become the first emperor of Qin, right? So Qin is kind of the family name as far as I'm aware, just like Zhou was. And so one guy is going to finally conquer all the others or have all the others under his control. And yeah, we'll be back to an imperial kind of system, right? Imperial China. And so one of the things that's actually, I think, set in motion a little bit earlier on is this thing called legalism. And what is legalism?
Governments can make the power if they are all together and help each other, so they set some rules, and it means if they put rules and people accept them, legalism is governments make some rules and set them
Yeah.
to make them more powerful.
Yeah, that's kind of true, right? And so if I can summarize what you said there, there's this kind of idea that, in order for a ruler like Qin to sort of have power and keep power, he needs some sort of system of rules, right? He needs some sort of structure, because it's no good, like, when you're the emperor of China, you can pretty much do whatever you want, right? You tell people what to do and people do it. You want to know what the rule is? It's whatever the emperor says is the rule, right? And I mean, yeah, that's fine, but it's also a kind of chaotic way to rule, right? So Shan Yang and others suggest that the best way to do it is to have some sort of system of rules, right? A legal structure. And so yes, the emperor is still at the top, but there's kind of a system of organization. And what kind of things are organized? What kind of things become organized under this legalist system? What's that? Did you say hierarchy? Oh yes, but what gets organized into a hierarchy? Say that one more time. Right, so the state itself is organized hierarchically, so the ruler can maintain power. What other things are kind of organized as part of that state organization? Yes, we've established that. Victoria?
There's like a central administration that like what rules and like guides everything.
Yeah, so there's an administration, right? There's a group of bureaucrats, right? People reading and writing, doing the work of government, right? And this is a very modern idea, right? Because that's how our modern states work, right? There's a lot of people working in government that are not the leader, right? But they're keeping the paperwork, right? They're following the rules. They're telling people what to do. They're punishing people if they don't do what they're supposed to do, right? If you speed too fast on the roads, there's police to write you a ticket, right? There's all these people who are kind of part of this system that are making it work, right? So the emperor doesn't have to make every decision. The emperor doesn't have to tell every single person what to do, right? There is an organization, there's a bureaucracy, there are rules to how things are done, and everyone is expected to follow the rules, right? So again, instead of, I'm the emperor, so whatever I say, that's what you do, here there's a very organized structure of how things are done, right? And the emperor still gets to make the decisions, but everybody kind of knows what the rules are, right? And they organize the legal code this way as well, right? There's actual clear laws and clear punishments for all of those crimes, right? So again, you don't have to ask the emperor what to do if somebody, steals his neighbor's cow, right? If you steal your neighbor's cow, there's a clear punishment for that, right? And it doesn't even matter, and this is pretty revolutionary, it doesn't even matter your status in society, right? If you're a poor man or a rich man, if you steal your neighbor's cow, there is a punishment for that, right? So again, there's these very clear legal and sort of bureaucratic rules that allow the state to function, right? And everybody kind of knows what's supposed to happen. The emperor doesn't have to make every single decision, right? They also organize kind of families in a certain way too, do they not?
Yes.
Yeah. How do they do that?
So like they organize the village across the land into units of 5 families each.
Yeah.
And I lead the member of each unit responsible for each child.
Ooh, very interesting, right?
The rule reward the one who based on the amount of the brain that they need.
Right. So families are grouped into five, a unit of 5 families, and they're kind of treated by the state almost as one person, right? If their harvest is good, they get rewarded. If their harvest is bad, or if one of them commits a crime, everyone is punished, right? Do you think that, I don't know, do you think that's fair? Yes? No? Who thinks that that's kind of a fair system? Who thinks that that's not a fair system? Yeah? Victoria, why not?
If somebody, imagine the right person doing everything correctly, they're doing the best they can, and then there comes another person who maybe like the work goes against one rule, and then the other people get worse.
Yeah.
Like it functions, but then it happens less often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Felicia, what do you think about it?
Overall, right?
Like, is it fair?
For what them to punish
Yeah.
the one who
Yeah.
outlines free.
It's how the best one.
Yeah?
It's how the best one.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Interesting, yeah.
It is not fair, but reasonable.
Well, and this is really all we have time for here, but it's also interesting too. It's kind of like a collective versus an individual worldview, right? And so, for those of us who have an individualistic worldview, we feel like, well, no, why should I be punished for what someone else does, right? Punish him or her, right? Why should I have to suffer, right? Whereas here, this is more of a collective mindset, right? So the idea that we're all in this together. We all share in, we all share in the rewards if things go well. We all suffer if things don't, right? And, to some degree that's always true. But again, there are some kind of cultures and periods that are more individualistic, some that are more collectively minded. And this is a bit of a collectively minded policy, right? And I bet it works pretty well, right? Because if there's one person who's not doing very well, the others are going to either work harder to compensate, or they're going to have to kick that person in the butt and get them moving, right? So I don't know. I think it's I don't know if it's fair or not, but I can see it being effective. Okay, so people, that's all the time we have for today. Tomorrow, I'm going to mark your quizzes tonight. We'll review them tomorrow. We'll talk just a little bit more about Qin Dynasty. Then I have something to show you related to the Qin, okay? So that is all for today. Pack it up. I will see you tomorrow.